So mastering brand expression to deliver they added more than visual impact at events. Wow, the pressure's on. So I thought I'd just throw some stuff on the board. I'm a creative, and I work on the agency side, so I thought I would kind of let you in a bit on my process. And I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm essentially a gun for hire, and I go into agencies and brands and help them kind of transform their experiences. But I started with this image because I wanted to talk about something that CMOs are throwing out a lot these days, something called brand love. You guys have probably heard about brand love. What's brand love? Um, it's all about making people fall in love with brands. And brand love is it's an emotional connection. People are looking for emotional connections to brands. They don't care about just buying products anymore. And if brands could tattoo themselves on our bodies, they would. So brand expression is a really powerful thing, but it's really difficult to achieve that in the event space. But when it's done, can you guys hear me? Are you guys hearing me okay? But when it's done appropriately, it's powerful stuff. So people demand more from brands, and brands really need to connect with people. And customers are looking for those personal connections with brands. Um, More and more these days, it's just so noisy out there, and brands don't have an avenue to connect with their consumers. So the event space is really powerful, and it's really nice to be a part of this in our community because even hearing kind of this tech talk that just happened, it's the same language. It's the wow factors which I'll talk about. It's the engagement that we're looking for, and I sort of start my process at the very beginning of that, looking at that brief or talking to brands about what they should do. So it's an exciting place to be. And let me just give you a brief history of my weird background. Um, I'm from there. Laura Schwartz is from there too, which is like Arctic. It's really fun when you're a kid, and it just really sucks when you're an adult. And so I got out of there as fast as I could. I mean, Chicagoans are pretty proud, but like first snows are awesome, but then after that, it's slush and it's horrible. I went to university and learned how to do this. I don't, college is like the movies, and so you do things like called keg stands. But I also did this. Look at youth. Look what it does to you. So I was an art student. I studied fine arts. My parents were like, "How are you going to ever make money?" I didn't quite understand the pathways that what I could do, but I knew that I wanted to be visual to some extent. So I went to Hollywood, that's where I could be visual. Sculpture turned into photography, and photography turned into producing. But I didn't really produce. I did a lot of that. I, I, I got my ass kicked a lot. And we talk about the events industry, but by Hollywood, if there's one thing I learned, it's how to be resilient. So I fetched a lot of coffee and took a lot of shit. But then after a while, I started directing and I started telling stories, and I sort of kind of reached this point in my career where I was like, wow, I'm kind of doing this, and I was kind of working really hard and got there. But then this happened. So, love can be very disruptive. And Australia was not even on my bucket list. I was just like, oh yeah, maybe, cool, good day, I don't know. So I fell in love with this girl who was traveling across, and I was like, all right, bye. And like we were buying phone cards. This was before like, all the technology that you have today that's free. So I ended up becoming really quickly jaded in Hollywood, and this like love was growing, and I ended up leaving, and I was a production executive at DreamWorks Television, and I kind of left it all, and everyone was like, you're insane, and I was like, yeah, probably. And anyway, I came here in my late 20s, did 7 years of like hard labor in television, and then I moved into advertising, and I was shooting TV commercials. Eventually married the girl and decided, okay, I want to go back. She wasn't too happy with that. But back there, I found myself working in this experiential space, and I was like, wow, this is experiential. What the hell is this? and it's where I found my home. And it's the reason why I stayed. It wasn't because of like getting back into Hollywood. So did that, worked for some big agencies like George P. Johnson, some big global agencies. I was senior creative director for automotive brands, and then I went off on my own and started my own thing called Hook and Arrows, which I'm sort of continuing here, which is a consultancy. And I've worked for some big agencies, some people I know in the room that I used to work with. And now I'm kind of just a gun for hire. And I kind of come in, I'm working on like, my head's about to explode. This week has just been nuts. I'm working on some massive briefs for multiple agencies. I put on different hats every day. I'm like, who am I today? Who am I today? What am I working on? But it's fun and exciting. So let's just dive into it. So we used to show up on Thursday nights or something and watch TV. You remember those days where it was so simple? Now kids don't even turn up to watch TV. It's a totally different landscape, and brands don't even have a place to even kind of speak anymore. So it's just this non-existent place. So it's not even what brands say anymore. It's really what brands do. So I would never put an elephant up this high, by the way. Would never consider that part of my strategy. But it used to be about taglines. It used to be about like, we have a brand, we have a tagline, we buy a product. And it's just become so much more than that these days. The internet, social media, everything's just changed that. People are looking to connect with brands on just a much different way. And then we come into this generation of like, what's in it for me? And it's not the millennials, it's all of us. We're all like, well, what's in it for me? How am I gonna give my time and my space to something, to a brand? There's gotta be something in it for me. So when I go ahead and we start that process of strategy, we really think about, well, what's in it for our customers? What's in it for the audience? What's in it for the brand? What's in it for the clients? It's always what's in it for me. And kind of that's where we start. We try to understand all the different stakeholders and how to sort of fulfill all those needs. So I want to talk quickly about brand expression. Have you guys heard this term before? Do you guys know what it is? It's like a brand personality, right? So I think a really good way to show it, and I'm a content guy, is to show you a little short video.
If people say your dreams are crazy, if they laugh at what you think you can do, good. Stay that way. Because what non-believers fail to understand is that calling a dream crazy is not an insult. It's a compliment. Don't try to be the fastest runner in your school or the fastest in the world. Be the fastest ever. Don't picture yourself wearing OBJ's jersey. Picture OBJ wearing yours. Don't settle for homecoming queen or linebacker. Do both. Lose 120 pounds and become an Ironman after beating a brain tumor. Don't believe you have to be like anybody to be somebody. If you're born a refugee, don't let it stop you from playing soccer for the national team at age 16. Don't become the best basketball player on the planet. Be bigger than basketball. Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. When they talk about the greatest team in the history of the sport, make sure it's your team. If you have only one hand, don't just watch football. Play it at the highest level. And if you're a girl from Compton, don't just become a tennis player. Become the greatest athlete ever. Yeah, that's more like it. So don't ask if your dreams are crazy. Ask if they're crazy enough.
Did any of you guys know that was Nike before the tagline came up? You guessed it. Yeah, I mean, look, they're really good at what they do. They really understand how to express themselves. They really understand their audience, and they're really highly strategic. This ad was super controversial. I don't know if you follow about Colin Kaepernick, the guy with the big, huge afro. he was booted out of the NFL for something he believed in. You guys can kind of look at it afterwards, but he basically gave up his entire dream, and Nike picked him up as an endorsement deal, and it caused such controversy. People were literally burning their Nike products. But the audience that Nike was speaking to totally got it and fell in love. I mean, it created brand love, and they saw their sales surge 31%. That's $6 billion US because of that. But why? It's because people really emotionally connected. You know, Nike's saying you can achieve your dreams. They should be bigger. They should be bigger than life. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, or what disabilities you might have. So that's brand expression. So how can you successfully translate that into an event space? That's tricky. That's where my headaches come in daily. For me, it boils down to one thing. It's been called several things, but I call it good design. So design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. So Jobs was really onto something. A crazy maniac, but like a brilliant maniac. It's really about how something works. So who in this room kind of sits around tables and backs away and says, oh, I'm not creative, I shouldn't be kind of in this, I shouldn't be talking about this, I shouldn't be here? Some of you? Really defensive about that? Well, you gotta stop, because creativity is about good design. It's about how it works. It's not just about making things look pretty. It's much more than that. It's about how it works. So we're all in this really collaborative, creative space. So we all really need to put on our creative hats. And creativity exists in many different forms. I want to talk about this for a second. I want to make sure we avoid this. Innovation. The only reason ideas don't happen is because the strategy just sucks, or it doesn't align back to the brand values or the brand expression. So it's how many of you have brought cool ideas, or ideas been brought to you? Like I'm the one who brings ideas to you guys. You can't bring ideas that are just like cool. There's got to be a reason. And if you can't explain what that reason is, then don't bring it. So it's really got to align back to that brand. It's got to align back to that brand expression. So strategy. It's how things work. Without strategy, no one will commit money to your projects. Worst of all, they won't commit to you. They won't want you in the room anymore. And if you're really good at convincing people and you do something without really good strategy, that's the worst case scenario. And then you have this event that just doesn't, it sort of is wonky, it sort of doesn't really work. And then you have an audience that walks away and feels it. And then everything we do just implodes at that point. And then the ones who get hurt the most is the brand, is the client. So how do you make a strategic event strategic? How do you make an event strategic? Well, it's really simple. It's a roadmap. You have to know where you're going. You have to know why you're going there. You have to know what it looks like when you get there. It's all about those outcomes. And the outcomes have to do with really understanding what your objectives are. So, especially true in marketing, it's about having clear, definable objectives. And most importantly, there needs to be consistency, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But I want to talk about this. This slide is just for all you people that are very logistically focused and rational, which is good. You need rational, logistically focused people in our industry, but you need to start here before you can really, when you sharpen a pencil, it starts out fat and ugly, and then it hones down to a point. So I think stupid ideas are really important. It's really important to bring crazy ideas to the table. It's really important to have that open mind and that open space, especially in those early phases of strategy and planning. I want to show you one of my stupid ideas. Everyone knows who she is. Do the guys know who she is? Okay. So she's an iconic fashion designer that's based in New York. Her Her name's Diane von Furstenberg. Iconic. Doesn't get more iconic than her. I was tasked with coming up with an engagement activity for the launch of a show that she has. Well, I don't know if it's still on even. It's called The House of DVF. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that show. It was for the launch of the show. It's one of those reality fashion shows, and she was kind of hosting it. So I came up with this really stupid idea. I was kind of laughed out of the boardroom. Then I didn't give up. I sort of kind of needed to like craft it. So take a look at this.
House of DVF is coming on E! Every Sunday starting in November. To celebrate it, we will wrap the it girl of New York, the real one, the Statue of Liberty in DVF prints. Visit eonline.com/DVF for all the locations and find out how your picture could be featured on E! Online. See you soon, guys.
So you see, stupid ideas can become real. I was like, well, she's got to dress the most iconic female in New York. Who is that? And I started kind of going through, like, who is this girl? Who's this woman? And I just thought, well, Statue of Liberty hasn't changed her dress in like 120 years. And she wears a wrap dress, and that's what DVF kind of stands for. I'm like, oh my God, we got to wrap the statue. Everyone's like, oh, national monument, symbolism of freedom all over the world, can't touch it. So, you get laughed at, but then you kind of figure things out. You're like, oh, well, it's so iconic. We want to create awareness in Manhattan, so let's just put these huge Statue of Liberties and let's wrap them in her dresses. Let's have a point of engagement with hashtags, and we kind of start building awareness around it. And it was all about like going back to objectives, right? So it's all about like, what was the whole point? What did we need to achieve? And it's about really understanding what those objectives are early on in the planning phases. Everyone needs to be on the same page with objectives. Everyone needs to be looking through that same lens when you're designing an event. You're figuring out how it works, and then you also want to be able to measure it. And the way to measure it is to agree on what are those measurement points and what are those goals. What do we want to achieve? And any agency that's worth its weight is going to be able to really provide the data for those points. So I don't really look at it as return on investment, because I think it's really tricky to quantify that, because you're investing X amount of dollars into an event. How's that brand going to see return? You can really agree on return on objectives. So really understanding what those objectives are up front, and agreeing upon that, like how many people, how many touch points, how much throughput do you want from people actually engaging with whatever you're trying to engage with. Lots of ways to measure it. And it's just about agreeing upon that right from the start on what those objectives are. So one of the biggest things in terms of designing an event is all about understanding who the attendees are, who the guests are, and understanding their journey, understanding all those touch points, the significant ones, the insignificant ones. It's actually the insignificant ones are really important, because those are the details that people often miss. And it's the details that really kind of get people all sort of ruffled and miffed, that they're like, oh, this, that, that people, you gotta like fulfill their needs on every step of the way. So going through that journey is really, really, really important. And that journey is all the way from pre-event, it's all the way before anyone steps into that event space, whether that's some sort of activation or it's a conference. There's got to be things happening pre-event all the way to post-event. And post-event is really important. Post-events where people start chattering and sharing, and that's I'll get to that in a little bit. But there's 4 key strategic pillars. There's a tract, which is all those beginning phases of developing a theme, that sort of design element that goes into kind of, maybe it's your registration or whatever. There's got to be a certain tagline. There's got to be certain ideas there that are already you're sort of providing insight into whatever that event is, so that you're already starting to attract people in. The next one's engage. So engagement. We all talk about engagement. Engagement's about really exciting programming that's going to just get people interested to walk over and become interested. Where immersion is really the deep dive. That's where I really look for, is really the immersion into the brand, into the product, into whatever it is that you're trying to build. And then the reward, which is the dangling carrot. It's, again, the what's in it for me. There always needs to be a what's in it for them. Whether you're giving them something, and don't do any branded pens and that kind of crap, because that's just a waste of money, and people just throw that stuff in a drawer and it doesn't do anything. It's always that reward always has to be what's in it for them, but does it constantly reinforce that brand expression? One of the ways to reinforce brand expression is consistency. It's constantly weaving that same thread throughout your event all the way through. It's consistency in every aspect, because people get derailed so easily. Our focus is, we're like monkeys. We just get distracted. As soon as someone gets into their phone, you've lost them. You've got to keep people constantly engaged the whole way through, and to make sure that you're constantly steering them and kind of leaving those breadcrumbs along the way. Consistency will do that. Storytelling. So I lovingly call it brand lubrication, and I thought this image was just perfect. So storytelling is like the age-old art of really kind of getting people into like the juice of like why are we here? Why that brand is? What are they trying to say? Storytelling it's everything. If we don't have stories to tell, like, don't even have an event. It's all about creating those stories and bringing them to life. It's, again, another key component of good design. So you've guessed now that one of my favorite brands is Nike. They, from a brand perspective, they really get it. And then the way they work with their agencies, there's really a great flow, and they're such a good brand to follow because you can see such good work. So the first example I showed you was really about brand expression. I really want to talk a little bit about storytelling, and so you really understand how that can really speak to your customers and have them really sort of deep dive into the brand and really kind of create this idea of love brands and really sort of fall in love. So this is really fun. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but check this out. How good is that? That's pretty good, huh? Nike approved that. He just didn't just take the money and run. It was a crazy idea. Um, he knew what the outcomes would be. Um, they bought it, and I think it's a great result. So it was. I think it was a really good execution. So Nike really understands how to tell stories. So they're really good at doing that, and we need to find ways to do that in the event space. So it's really important. You can't just show up and expect it to happen. The magic is about storytelling. It's about people connecting back to the brands. And then, once again, I want to talk about that post-event stuff. Word of mouth, man, it's so powerful. It's so important. When an event is great, people talk. And when an event sucks, people talk. So you're not going to stop the chatter. I was just looking at a brief just the other day that it even says, Insta ready. Everyone knows that when you create this environment, it needs to reflect that brand, and that's that brand's expression. Everything, every corner, people are photographing, they're posting. It's really important that everything is reflective of that brand expression for it to be powerful. Because word travels fast, really fast. And when brands do something that fails, we all know about it. We love sharing that, don't we? When we see brands just fail. Now we talked about this a little bit earlier about wow factor. The elusive snow leopard. If you guys saw this movie, Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Sean Penn was out there as a National Geographic photographer, just trying to capture this elusive snow leopard, and that's what I kind of call the wow factor. And wow factor, it's when brands say, "I want never before seen," and I'm just like, never before seen. Roll my eyes, everything's been done before for the most part. We're just trying to repackage it and do it differently. But the wow factor is only wow when it really goes back to the objectives. It really goes back to the strategy. Otherwise, don't do it, because it's just going to be wow for wow's sake. And we've just heard about the technology. If people want virtual reality or augmented reality, that's just a tool. So it's got to fit whatever we're trying to communicate. Otherwise, it's just technology. And at the end of the day, you're like, oh yeah, put on VR, cool, woo, 360. But if it doesn't really help the brand or help the storytelling, then don't do it. So really, at the end of the day, as a creative, as a strategist, from that beginning part of that phase of planning, you really need to give them what they want. So whether it's the agency, the brands, the customers, we need to fulfill needs, and we need to make sure that we fulfill those needs. As a creative, I always go in and respond to a brief with, God, this is exactly what they're looking for. Great, here it is. But in order to make an event really stand out, to really do something different, you kind of need to show them what they need. And it's always kind of the scary bit of showing them the crazy, stupid idea, but hopefully that stupid idea, you've workshopped it a bit so they don't laugh you out of the room. But to really get cut through and to create impact, it's really about kind of being courageous and being bold. So my friends in the event industry, you really gotta you gotta just pull it together, and once in a while do something a little bit different, because that's where brands really stand out, and that's what we all want. We all want that cut through. We want to be showcased in a different way. We want to be heroic. So I just urge you to be brave and be bold. Anyway, so that's me. And if anyone has any questions, otherwise we can circle back on social media, and then you guys could have your afternoon tea. Yeah. That's what I eat for breakfast. That's what I do every single day. It's hard. A lot of it has to do with the people that are behind that brand. a lot of people, and this kind of ties into what I just kind of ended with, a lot of people want to do things the same way because it's safe. Revitalizing a new brand really has to come from within. As a creative, as an agency, you could come in with great ideas and you could stay within guidelines and within the voice and the tone and make sure it just really feels that brand. But I think it's really important to have an open mind as a brand, to really sort of bring in those creative agencies that challenge you and push you in uncomfortable territory, because oftentimes they'll push you in a direction that's maybe too far. And once again, it's about coming back into alignment to some degree. But really kind of revitalizing old brands, I think it's really exciting because I think old can be new again. And again, it's about telling new stories and connecting with new audiences. So I think it's about really understanding who you're trying to target, and you can really start developing new conversations. And I think that's the first way how to start revitalizing brands. And then it's about looking at all their channels, all their social, everything about that. I'm working with a brand right now that is known in a B2B sort of space, but they want to be known more in a B2C space. And how do you really sort of transition into that? And how do you revitalize something that they've heard of? How do you create or break perceptions? I did a lot of work for Microsoft back in the States before they were a consumer brand. They were more of a software brand, and they were coming out with new consumer technology, like new sort of devices. And I was a hardcore Apple guy, and I got on these devices and I was like, wow, this brand's really evolving. It started with new leadership, though. That you have Satya Nadella, who's the new CEO, and he was really about breaking down the silos and really working with partners and not being so anti-Apple. And I mean, the guy carries an iPhone. Blew my mind. Mr. Microsoft carrying an iPhone. And here I couldn't use my Mac laptop in a boardroom there because everyone was so freaked out, like you can't use that. But here the boss has got an iPhone. I mean, it all starts there, and then I think it trickles down. And then it's about having some boldness into your step and kind of starting new conversations. Hope that answers it to some degree. Yes, Stephen. Yeah. So we moved back to Australia 3 years ago. We woke up in a sweat one night and thought, well, we can't raise our kids in Los Angeles. So we moved back, and I started as head of creative for a big agency called CI Events, and then I went to another smaller agency as head of creative, and I kind of got back into that corporate thing of leading big creative teams and just being sort of that sort of lead captain on trying to win new business for these agencies. For me, I'm sort of still somewhat known. I really fly under the radar, and part of that's a little bit of my strategy because I work for a lot of agencies, and I wear lots of different hats. So it's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot about how you and I met. I guess in the States, it's a much more mature industry, and it's much more specialized. So we call this event space, but like there's so many different kinds of events. Like there's brand experiences, there's conferencing, there's activations, there's consumer trials. This all under the umbrella, and a lot of agencies think they can do it all, and they really can. It's like different brains, it's different skill sets. So my background's so strange, and I'm sort of like this Swiss Army knife of tricks that I could sort of come out with, because at the end of the day, it goes back to that cave painting. It comes back to the basics. It comes back to basic storytelling and how are we going to try to really change people. So, to answer your question is like I sort of like do fly under the radar. I work with, for me at this stage in my career, I work with a select group of people. It's about this balance and being in happy spaces, and I find that doing that on my own and my own turf, and I work really insane hours, and I'm usually a really bad employee because I don't follow rules that well. And how could I be this this sort of model when I break the rules myself. So for me, it's all about delivering the right results, and I deliver them in just unorthodox ways. But you know, that's how creative usually happens, and I don't really necessarily fit into a box so easily.
I have to wrap you up only because we've got to start the next session in 10 minutes.
Oh.
You guys probably all like a quick coffee.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm